I believe that the Christian belief in life after death gives a person the best resources, better than any other religion, for personal happiness, for hope in the midst of suffering and pain, and even motivation to treat people kindly and self-sacrificially. In my opinion, other religions provide a false hope, even a contradictory hope. Now, what I hope you don't hear from me is that other people in other religions are bad or evil or anything like that. Like I have Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu friends who are very kind and loving. But what I'm trying to argue is that the belief system in the afterlife to which they subscribe, if fully believed, would not actually motivate someone to, for instance, be kind to this earth, be kind to other people, have hope in the midst of suffering, these kind of things. It's a battle of ideas. It's a battle of worldviews. It's not a battle among people. I would never, ever say that because someone's a Buddhist, because someone's a Muslim, therefore they're a bad person. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying when they act in kindness, which they often do, they're borrowing from a different worldview to do so. And so how we're going to look at this is we're going to look at Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, atheism, and then Christianity. And we're going to look at what I believe are the deficits of each of these worldviews in their belief in the afterlife, and then see how Christianity is utterly different. And so let's begin with Buddhism. I spent 3 years in China learning Mandarin. I was getting my master's degree in Mandarin English interpretation, and I had the opportunity to engage with a lot of Buddhists. I had Buddhist friends. And what I found really quickly with Buddhist doctrine, not necessarily with people, like I said, but with doctrine, I found that it's a very pessimistic religion. The core tenet, I would say, of Buddhism is this idea of that life is suffering. And the goal of Buddhism then is to fully understand that life is suffering and cease the desire to exist. Because if all of life is suffering, then why would we want to exist in it? Therefore, an existence outside of the body or even a non-existence is far superior than to existence in this life. And so then that gets into reincarnation and karma, where they believe that, for one thing, as humans, their metaphysics, meaning how they look at what a human is comprised of. That's one aspect of metaphysics. It's like answering the ultimate questions of reality is metaphysics. And their metaphysics of a human person consists of 5 components, really. So think of things like your consciousness or your perception. These are parts of the 5 components, but none of those aspects of you is the true you. But then those 5 components together are also not the true you. There really is no true you. And the reason for that is because you're always in a state of flux. You're never the same that you were yesterday. What I like to call it then is you have a continuous self. You don't have a true self, but a continuous self, because in a small degree, like this is a microcosm of what they're trying to teach, is the actions that you did yesterday influence who you are today. And I agree to that with some extent, but when you blow it up on a broader scale, what they say is who you were in the past life and what you did in your past life determines who you are today. And what you're doing now determines who you will be in the future. And so you get these ideas of reincarnation and karma. And so according to Buddhism, reincarnation is actually a curse, which I did not realize before studying Buddhism and before going to China. I thought reincarnation was a good thing. I'm like, oh, wait, we get to try again? No, it's actually a curse because it's holding you in this life of suffering. Because life equals suffering, therefore reincarnation is a curse until you can escape it. And so for Buddhism, when we answer the big worldview questions of what's wrong with this world and how do we fix it, what they'll say with what's wrong with the world is life itself. Existence itself, bodily existence as we are now, is evil because bodily existence equals suffering. And so how do we fix it? Well, we escape bodily existence. And we do it in kind of 2 ways. One, through that enlightenment, which when you are enlightened to the fact that all of life is suffering, and you can finally achieve a state in which you say, I do not desire to exist, that's when you can achieve nirvana and you can escape reincarnation. But the other side of that is you have to off-balance your negative karma by gaining positive karma. And so you basically have to do more good than bad. You have to do ethical things. You have to be a moral person. You have to meditate and practice self-discipline and all these practices in order to gain more positive karma than negative. And these 2 aspects, that enlightenment plus gaining more karma, will allow you to escape reincarnation, and then you will have a blissful, non-individualistic existence, because again, there is no true self. And so when all those 5 disparate aspects, those disparate components of yourself are released from bodily existence, you are no longer you, and you achieve peace in that way. But there's a few specific areas where I believe that it wouldn't actually lead to human flourishing. If these beliefs were truly believed to the core of the person, that it wouldn't lead to human flourishing. Here's why. First, if bodily existence is negative and all of life is suffering, that actually de-incentivizes people to help those who are suffering, to help the poor, the marginalized, the weak, the down and outers, the people who cannot help themselves. I think this view that all of life is suffering would actually hinder that. Because if all of life is suffering and you see someone else in suffering, that's actually a good case study for them to say, hey, look, don't you see how all of life is suffering? The way to escape it is not by bettering your life right now. You don't need to find a good job. You don't need to be more self-disciplined, study more, work on these very practical steps to make your life better. In fact, what you should do is you should be seeking enlightenment and nirvana that says all of life is suffering. So none of this matters. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to prepare ourselves in this life for escaping reincarnation. And so I think that this view would actually incentivize people to leave others in their suffering instead of being willing to go towards them in self-sacrificial love and want to help them out of it because suffering is evil. And we want people to not escape reality, but in this reality to escape suffering. Now, some people will say, oh, but that's where negative karma and positive karma comes into play, where if you want to escape, if you want to achieve nirvana, you have to build up positive karma, and you do that by helping other people. The reason I would argue against that is that's ultimately a selfish reason. That's not a self-sacrificial reason to help someone else. You're just saying, you know what? I want to build up good karma for myself. Therefore, I'm going to go help someone else. And I don't think ultimately motivating people with selfish reasoning to help someone else is a long time fruitful reason of motivating people to help others. And I'll get to that at the very end of this video. And second, when you achieve nirvana, you cease to exist as an individual. The reason I have such a problem with this is because in life, we attach a lot of value to our achievements, to what we've done, to the beauty and the love we've experienced, and especially to the relationships we've made. My relationship with my spouse, my wife, my relationship with my future unborn baby boy who's going to be here in a few months, my relationship with my broader family, my relationship with my friends. If we are escaping individual existence, then none of that matters in any real way. It's just a temporary thing that we have to put up with until we achieve nirvana. And so I'm not saying that Buddhists actually live in this sort of way, that they don't care about the people around them. But what I'm saying is if you truly believe in this idea of reincarnation and nirvana, then it would lead people to believe that relationships are not the ultimate thing that's important, that there's something more important, that the individual escaping suffering is more important than the community aspect of humanity, that general human flourishing, that something's more important than that. And what I'm going to argue throughout this video is that all of existence can be summed up in relationships. In the Christian worldview, that relationships is at the center. Relationship with God and relationship with one another. And I think the biggest epidemic in our culture today is loneliness. It's anti-relationships, right? It's everyone's lonely. Everyone longs for relationships. And so the answer to that is relationships, not to play down relationships like I believe this idea of nirvana would do. Okay, next, let's talk about Hinduism. And Hinduism is very similar to Buddhism in its ideas of reincarnation and karma, but its metaphysic is very different, where Hindus do believe in a true self, and there's three kind of aspects to a human being. It's your physical body, it's your life force, or kind of like your breath of life. It's a very abstract concept, but then also your personhood, so your mind, will, and emotions. But then there's also the true self, which isn't any of those three aspects. It's actually the Atman, Atman. And the Atman is actually a little piece of divinity. And so for the Hindu, enlightenment is not achieved by realizing that all of life is suffering. Enlightenment is achieved when you realize that you and the divine are one, which this is a much more popular concept in today's world, where even people will talk about Jesus this way. They'll say, oh, Jesus was just the example to show us that all of us are divine. And I won't go into that. I could do a totally separate video on maybe Hinduism belief in the divine versus the Christian belief in the divine. But that's what Hindus believe. They believe that in the true self of each person is divine, and the divine is the person. And so you can use the analogy of Brahman, which is this divine entity. He's not even an entity or it. It's this formless, uniting, eternal power. That's what the Brahman is. And I like to call it the all one, because it really defines how Hindus see the divinity, the divine. And that's different from their gods, right? But the ultimate divine that everything belongs and everything is united to is the Brahman. And so the ultimate idea of enlightenment for the Hindu is to realize that we and the divine are one, but unfortunately we have been deceived in our bodily existence. And so the end desire for the Hindu is to understand that this whole world is an illusion, that everything about our existence is an illusion. It's not the true reality. And our individuality is also an illusion, because us and the divine are one. It's like an ocean where the divine is the ocean and we are a drop of that ocean, where you can maybe separate out one drop from the ocean, but then when it's returned, you at once realize that actually it was all along a part of the ocean itself. And so the key goal with reincarnation and karma, again, is to escape this false reality. Where it was suffering for Buddhism, it's an illusion for Hinduism. And so we see that physical life is negative, like we did in Buddhism. The true self, while it can achieve a perfect state, this perfect state is a non-individual self. So I have the same critiques there. And then also reincarnation, just like with Buddhism, it's escapable through our own effort, through gaining wisdom ourselves, and then also practicing things that build up good karma, positive karma, and limit negative karma. So here are my critiques of that. One, I don't think it needs to be stated too in depth because I think it's fairly straightforward. If all of this world is an illusion, then none of it matters. It's the same argument I have against atheism for finding meaning in life. Like, if we believe at the end of the day that the sun is going to burn out and all of existence is going to cease to exist, why does it all matter in the end? None of it's eternal. The relationships that we're making, the love that we're experiencing, the beauty that we're witnessing, the achievements that we're making, if none of it matters, if none of it's eternal, why ultimately care? If you truly believe that this world is an illusion, I think that leads people to act in a certain way. Again, I'm not saying Hindus aren't kind people and nice people, but I think that if this worldview is to be believed at its core, it could lead people to say, my relationships don't matter, my work doesn't matter, I just need to escape this illusion, and that's all there is. It's kind of like the Matrix. Right? Red pill, blue pill. Second, I think it's dangerous for any religion when we say that we can achieve the paradise, heaven, you name it, on our own effort. And that's what Hinduism and Buddhism are saying with reincarnation. They're saying, I, in my own efforts, can achieve the wisdom necessary and achieve the karma necessary to escape this reality, to achieve peace finally and at last. And the reason I think this is dangerous is, and I think it's true of all religion, is that when you have a religion that says, I can achieve perfection or I can achieve paradise on my own, it leads to one of two conclusions. Either you become depressed because you feel like you failed and that now you're a failure and you have no value because you cannot live up to the standards by which the religion is putting for you. On the other hand, though, if you do feel like you've achieved, you almost immediately become prideful and arrogant. And I think most people who hate religion and want nothing to do with religion, it's because they've seen that kind of person in their lives. They've seen the person who thinks they're all that and they think they've achieved something in their religion, whether it's knowledge or effort or status or you name it, and they're just disgusted by it. They're like, religion should not be about the self. It's supposed to be about something far more grand than that, about all of existence, about human flourishing, and about seeking the divine, seeking the one who created us, to know him. That's what it's supposed to be about. But so many people make it about themselves, and they make it about themselves when they can achieve something on their own. And so when you can achieve something on your own, you get prideful, or if you fail, you become depressed and feel like you have no value at all. And so I think there's a real danger in thinking that you can achieve this paradise or whatever your version of salvation is in your religion on your own. So now let's move on to Islam. And Islam is really interesting because it overlaps a lot with Christianity. There are a lot of scholars who believe that a lot of the resurrection, Day of Judgment stuff is taken directly from Christianity. The way that Muslim scholars argue against that is they say, no, God has revealed himself to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but only Islamic writings and Muslims have retained the truth of God Almighty without corruption, whereas Judaism and Christianity have been corrupted. And so that's why there's overlap, not because 400 years or 500 years after Christianity, we took from them. So I'll just leave that there. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of similarities. For one thing, the metaphysic of Islam is that the humans have a body and a soul. And then when you die, your soul is ripped from your body. For the unrighteous, that's actually a painful experience. For the righteous, it's a more pleasant experience. And there's this intermediate state that I won't go into. Muslim scholars disagree on what they think this intermediate state is, how long it lasts. Could be a couple years, thousands of years, you name it. But then there's the day of resurrection, also called the Day of Judgment. And that's really what I want to focus on, because that's the hope of the Muslim. And on the day of resurrection, everyone is raised from the dead and their souls are returned to their bodies and they face judgment. And a really important aspect of this judgment is the Quran harps over and over consistently and adamantly that even the smallest acts and the smallest intentions are going to be judged on that day, and that God will judge everyone according to these acts. And he won't miss the smallest thing. There is mention of Allah's mercy, but the emphasis is on judgment. And so on this day of judgment, the people will be separated. The righteous will go to paradise and the unrighteous will go to hell. And what's interesting about the depiction of paradise in Islam, think of like the Garden of Eden. So it's this lush area with amazing food, delicious food, amazing and beautiful clothing, and then probably the most unique and most popular aspect of paradise and most well-known aspect is the 72 virgins. And what's interesting about the descriptions of the 72 virgins in the early writings of Islam is that it's all physical depictions of their beauty, right? And somewhat sensual depictions as well. They don't have individuality. They don't have personality. These virgins are just depicted in a way that's pleasing to those who will know them. And so after you've painted this picture of paradise, you see that it's a very materialistic paradise. It's not about relationships. It's really about material pleasures. And that will be my first critique in just a second. And then on the flip side, hell is also a very materialistic place where think Dante's Inferno type stuff. And the suffering that people experience in hell is also very material. If every act and intention is judged, I would just say that we have no hope, that we as humans have no hope. An analogy I like to use is if you take a voice recorder and you tape it to your chest and you record your own words for your whole life, and it only records all the times you told someone else you should do this, you shouldn't do this, your standards for other people's living. And if you go to heaven and God says, I'm not going to judge you by my standards as the divine, I'm going to judge you by your own standards. Anytime you told someone else you should do this, you shouldn't do this, and we'll see, can you measure up to that standard? No one can. No one can measure up even to their own standards. If I've told my wife or my kids or my friends, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, I have not measured up to my own standards. How much more would I have a hard time measuring up to the standards of the perfect God Almighty? I wouldn't cut it. I would have no chance. And so instead of there being hope in the afterlife, I don't think there's any hope. If it's truly believed in the heart of hearts that this judgment day is coming and this judgment day will be as it's depicted, there really is no hope. And now there is teaching that Allah is merciful and that he will forgive, but I see there's a contradiction between Allah's mercy and his justice, where you can't have both in Islam. There is no reconciliation to these two problems, whereas in Christianity, there is reconciliation, where God is both just and loving. He fully punishes Jesus. Jesus fully takes on every person's sins, satisfying God's justice. But on the flip side, he also shows his love because he's willing to sacrifice all of that for our sake. So we see his love completely and his justice completely in the same event, the cross of Jesus Christ. And so it's not a contradiction in Christianity because both are fulfilled. But in Islam, you don't see that. All you see is a contradiction of mercy and justice. And so second, and this is probably the greater critique, is I see a very hedonistic view of the afterlife in Islam, where it is all about physical bodily pleasures. And even if you want to say that the 72 virgins, like recent scholars have wanted to separate themselves from the idea that the virgins are there for any sort of sensual or sexual pleasure for faithful Muslims. But even if you say, okay, they're not sexual or sensual, because they're not written in a way that they have any personality or individuality, they're clearly there for someone else's service. They're not there because them in themselves are valuable. And I think the ideal afterlife should be one of mutual respect and love, where relationships between all human beings flourish in mutual love and respect, not in any sort of hierarchical system. And so if this version of the afterlife is fully believed by someone, I think that would have effects on how you live your life, more materialistic and probably some objectifying of women because they're seen as a reward and not people in and of themselves. That may sound harsh. I don't intend it as harsh, but I'm just looking at the worldview as it's depicted. Now, let me briefly talk about atheism. I know a lot of people want to harp on it's not a religion, that's okay, or it's not a worldview, that's okay too. But when you say you're an atheist, you're automatically answering some worldview questions. And I think if atheists are being intellectually honest, when they answer the questions, what's wrong with the world and how do we fix it? I think they have to answer it, specifically a material atheist. They have to answer it from a Darwinian perspective. I'm not talking about other atheists. A lot of times when people say they're an atheist, what I think they mean is they just don't believe in a monotheistic God. They don't believe in one all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving God, but maybe they believe in some higher power, some spirituality and stuff. That's more like pantheism or panentheism. That's not actually atheism. Who I'm addressing is the material atheist, who says all that exists is matter. That's it. All that exists is the physical stuff of the universe. And so what they would say in answering the worldview questions is they would say, from a Darwinian perspective, one, what's wrong with the world? Weakness, because it's survival of the fittest. And so what's wrong is weakness. And how do we fix it? We gain more power. We survive, and we learn to be better at surviving than the weak. That is the solution to the problem of weakness, is gain power. This is the basic tenet of Darwinism, and it's the one operating principle of all life on earth, the survival of the fittest. Now, obviously, I have problems with this. If that is the operating principle of life, then there is no objective reason to help someone else. There is no objective reason to help someone else for their sake. It's always selfish motivation. It's always what's in it for me. There is no ability to just say, I'm willing to sacrifice my own good for the sake of someone else because that person is valuable. You cannot convince someone on a moral basis to not be a racist, to not cheat on their spouse, to not cheat on their taxes, to sacrifice their own good, their own money, even their own life for someone else, for their country, anything like that. You can't. All you can say is one of two things. You can either say, that hurts me, so please don't do it, or sacrifice this short-term gain because it will be good for you in the long term. But you can never say objectively, do something because it's good for someone else, period. And I think this is so counter to human existence that we have to throw it out. That if every single person on earth truly believed this to be true, if they truly believed that there is no objective morality to anything, and the only thing that matters is survival of the fittest, that I need to get mine in order to survive, and perhaps there is even talk of people trying to learn how to live forever now with the improvements and the progression of the sciences and technology, that one day we'll be able to live forever. If all there is to life is survival of the fittest, then I need to do everything I can to take care of number one. If every single person on earth believed that, I think society would implode on itself. Absolutely implode. Because inherently and instinctively, we understand that life is not about the self. When life is about the self, you're the most lonely. But life is about together. Life is about relationships. It's not just about the other person, because if you only sacrifice for the other person and you let them use you and abuse you, that's also not healthy. But in the mutual self-sacrificial relationship of, say, a marriage, when me as the husband says, I am giving all of myself over to you, my wife says the same thing back to me, that is where true happiness and human flourishing happens. It's about one another. It's about together. But the atheistic worldview says, no, it's about me. And I think our society would implode if everyone believed that. Okay, now that we've explored all the other worldviews, let's dig a little bit deeper into the Christian worldview and see how it's different than these other major religions. And I do believe it gives the best resources for personal happiness, hope in the midst of pain, and it even motivates you to be kind and self-sacrificial towards others. For one thing, Christianity, unlike any other religion, believes that this world will actually be renewed. I forgot to say this when I was talking about Islamic faith, but they believe that after you go to paradise or hell, the earth itself is destroyed. And it's no longer the place of dwelling for people, for humans at all. Instead, because of the judgment day, it's destroyed and it's no longer inhabitable. In the Christian worldview, that's completely different. Christianity, unlike Islam, says this world matters. It's going to be renewed. It's not going to be destroyed and left alone. It's going to be renewed and made even better than it currently is. Against Hinduism, which says it's an illusion, Christianity again says, no, this life and this world itself matters. And unlike Buddhism, Christianity says even though there is suffering, the creation is good. It's good and it's redeemable. So yes, there's pain and there's suffering, but it's not natural, it's not normal, it's not meant to be here. And one day it will be removed and all will be made new. For instance, in Romans 8, it says, for the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. The creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay, and it will be brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. And so there's this freeing of even creation itself, that one day we're going to be able to enjoy creation as it was meant to be. It was not meant to be filled with suffering, and it's not an illusion, and it's not just going to be destroyed and thrown away. It's going to be renewed. Second, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I am making everything new. Not only will all of creation be restored, the emphasis of eternal life in Christianity, in the Bible, is that of interpersonal relationships. You're not losing your personality like either Buddhism or Hinduism, and you're not focused on materialistic benefits like in Islam. It's all about interpersonal relationships. And it's most certainly not a power-hungry, self-serving existence like is taught in Darwinism. Instead, it's all about mutually loving relationships. In John 17, Jesus says this, now this is eternal life, that they know you, the one true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you sent. So first and foremost, eternal life is about relationship with God, knowing the one who created you, having a deep and intimate and rich relationship with him. And second, then I saw, and this is again in Revelation 21, just a different part of the verse. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. So from these two verses, you see, if you balance these two verses out, you see that the hope of the afterlife for the Christian is not a disembodied non-existence. It's not a materialistic world. It is a place in which we finally have harmonious relationships with God and with one another. And so for the Christian, now I've been saying this about the other religions, and it's the same, it's true for Christianity. Other religions are often better than I think their worldview would make them be if they truly believed it. But Christianity also, I think a lot of Christians don't believe this enough. And so they're a lot worse than their worldview would lead them to be if they truly believed this to be true. But if Christians were to truly grasp this and fully believe that this is true, I think it would lead them to treat the world better. I truly think that they would be better stewards of their things, of their possessions, of the world itself. I think that they would pour more into relationships. They would be kinder. They would be more patient. They would be more loving because they knew that the person sitting across from them had eternal value. That even their career, because it's cultivating this world, and this world is not bad, it's actually going to be renewed. And so even their career itself is not a waste. It's not going to be thrown away. It's not going to be destroyed, but it actually has value because the world itself has eternal value. And the cultivation, if you think about careers, every single career exists for human flourishing. And we try to stop these cheating businesses, or the businesses that use sweatshops, or all these things that hinder human flourishing. And we try to only promote the businesses that promote human flourishing because we inherently know that a product and like an entrepreneurial endeavor is designed to make people's lives better. So even if you're not directly interacting with a person, but you're pursuing a career that's promoting human flourishing, we know that's inherently good. And so you can trust that your career has value, that your interpersonal relationships have value, and that everything in between has eternal value. That's what Christianity teaches. And if Christians were to believe that, I think they would be different. And I think the biggest problem with Christians acting harshly, mean, selfish, is because they don't grasp fully some of these truths. And lastly, and most importantly, I said I was going to address this earlier in the video, and I'm doing it now, is the Christian belief that life after death, where we go, is a gift. It's a complete gift. This is actually where Islam is correct and agrees with Christianity, is that God is just. He is completely just, and he will not let unjust behavior go. He will judge every wrong word that was said, every wrong intention, every wrong act. But he also loves us so much. And so the Christian believes that God, the God of the universe, in his generosity, he created all things. Out of the overflow of his love and generosity, he created all things. But what we as humans did, we said, no, God, I don't need you now. You've given me all the stuff I could want. I love your stuff that you created for me. I don't need you. And so the world was shattered. This is where Buddhism is right, that the world is filled with pain and suffering, but it's not for the reason that they think it is. It's because we chose to go our own way. We separated ourselves from the source of life, who is God. But God, in his love and kindness, he didn't want to leave us in that suffering. And so he sacrificed himself for us. Jesus came to earth, and he not only did he die the death where he took on the sin of humankind for himself, but he also lived the life that we couldn't live. He did measure up to the standards that God had set. He lived a perfect life, a life that we could never have lived. And then he died for us. He took our place on that cross so that his righteousness could be given to us. So that when God looks at us, he doesn't see our sin, he sees Jesus, because he looked on Jesus as if Jesus were us. And so Jesus took our punishment on our behalf. And then he rose from the dead, showing the first fruits of what resurrection will be like for the rest of us. And so this is not something that we earned. It's something that Jesus earned for us. And so like the Apostle Paul says, he says, you are saved by grace through faith. This is not your own doing. This is a gift of God so that no one can boast. If it's a gift and not something I earned, at the same time, both makes me humble and confident. I can't boast, but it makes me both humble and confident. It makes me confident because I know finally, after all this time, I know for a fact that I'm loved. The thing that my soul has been longing for more than anything else is to know that I'm loved and cherished. And now I finally know because of the cross. But it also humbles me because it tells me that there is nothing that I could have done to get this on my own, that I needed him to save me. I was hopeless on my own. And it was actually the death of God himself. My sins were so bad that only the death of God could satisfy the justice. And so it makes me both humble and confident. But in all of this, there's no room to boast. And so why is this more motivating than selfishness to help other people? Why is this better than saying, oh, if you help that person, it's good for you? Because it's just out of an overflow of love. You see, everything that we need, every single thing that we need has already been given to us by grace. That our relationship with God has been restored, and we have the hope in the future that everything else is going to be renewed as well. Everything we have in Christ is already better than anything we can get on our own. And so if we're already filled with this love and this joy, all that's left is to give that out to others. When you see that you don't have anything else that you need to get from someone else, when you've gotten all of it from Jesus already, all that's left is for you to give. The example that God the Father has shown, that in his generosity, because he has everything, he is self-sufficient in himself. There's nothing he needs from us. All he wants to do is give, because his nature is generous. And when we receive from him, that fills our cup, so that then we can go fill other people's cups. But if you're motivated by selfish gain, you're always going to be worried. You're always going to be afraid. Well, am I getting what I need? Well, am I getting what I need? But the Christian doctrine says you already have everything you need in Christ. Christ has already given you everything so that now you can go and love other people as yourself. That's why love is more motivating to treat other people with kindness and to treat them self-sacrificially than any selfish motive there is. And every other one of these religions that I've discussed has a selfish motive for treating other people well, whether it's improving your karma, escaping reincarnation. In Islam, it's escaping the judgment of trying to be good enough to measure up to the standard of God, or even the materialistic aspect of the afterlife, that it's a selfish existence in the afterlife. Or with atheism, it's all about the me. How can I make sure that I am not weak, but I am the fittest? Christianity says no. No, it says no to all of that selfishness. And it says no, because I have already received everything I need from Christ. Therefore, I can go and do likewise to others. Just in the same way Jesus treated me, now I can treat someone else. Now, I'm fully aware that a topic like this is kind of dangerous. And I just want to reiterate that I don't have any beef with followers of these various religions. Like, I have friends from each one who affirm each of these religions: atheism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, all of them. But it's a battle of ideas. It's a battle of worldviews that I'm trying to articulate. And for someone who's seeking, who doesn't know, if you're someone who is like, I'm not religious, but I'm looking into religion, then I hope this video gives you a good perspective on the Christian view of religions and the afterlife. And I'm making my case for Christianity. I feel like this is a great way to give someone a perspective on the Christian view of the afterlife over and against other religions' afterlives. And so two other things that I need to mention before I wrap up. One, people may have a critique of this video that says, well, just because it's useful doesn't mean it's true. Just because Christianity produces human flourishing doesn't actually mean it's right. And in one sense, I would agree. But in another sense, I would use an analogy and argue against it by saying, I have a doctor friend who he's explained how he does diagnoses with patients' illnesses. And he will have a hypothesis for the diagnosis, and then he'll treat them with a medication. If that medication doesn't work, then he'll try a different diagnosis. And he'll do that over and over until when he finds the right medication and the patient responds to the treatment, then he's like, oh, okay, that was the correct diagnosis. And so he did not know the correct diagnosis until the medication was useful. And in the same way, I don't think that Christianity, just because it's useful for human flourishing, automatically means it's true. But I do think it's another data point on the map that says this, among a bunch of other reasons, whether it's evidential or whether it's presuppositional or whether it's this usefulness argument, that it leads people to believe that it is valid, that it is true. But you cannot alone use Christianity as useful as a proof that it's true, because that's utilitarianism. I do not ascribe to that philosophy, but I do think it leads people to take it seriously. And so that's why I'm discussing it, that it gives resources to the person that no other religion does for personal happiness. And second, I think people are going to ask, well, why didn't you talk about Judaism? And the reason I didn't talk about Judaism is, one, because Christianity is seen as a development. Christians see themselves as developing out of Judaism, and that the Old Testament scriptures, what Jews would call the Hebrew scriptures, that's our Bible too. And so we would say that there's going to be a lot of overlap. There is development, but it's such a complicated topic that I just want to address it in its own video. And I didn't want to get into it in this and muddy the waters. And so it's kind of a different conversation. And so to me, this was sufficient, but I do hope to make a specific video soon that talks about the development of the afterlife and the concept of the resurrection from Judaism to Christianity, the differences and similarities there. So thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment. If I offended, I really do apologize. That was not the goal of this video. I'm always after truth. And if something I said is wrong, correct me. and I'll be better for it. And if there's anyone who's watching this video that's an expert on one of these religions and wants to have a conversation live, I would love to do that. Not a debate, obviously, but I would love to have a conversation and pick your brain, you pick mine, and we can have a really fruitful conversation that way. But for everyone else, thanks for watching, fools, and I'll see you in the next video.